No, that was a while before I got here. I didn't move to the area until 2005 at that time. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the work session. We have two items on the work session this evening. The first one would be presented by Dr. Emil Cunningham. He is chair of the Task Force on Policing and Communities of Color. Welcome, Emil.
Thank you. Y'all good? All right. Wonderful. I appreciate this opportunity to be here, everybody, and thanks for having me. As introduced, my name is Dr. Emil Cunningham. I did serve as the chair on the Task Force on Policing and Communities of Color, and this honestly is a presentation that I've been offering to different folks since we've been done with this initial phase of the report. So excited to go through it with you. It's the exact same presentation I've offered to various municipalities, and so happy to have been invited to serve here in this regard. A couple of things as we sort of go through here, and I think the first thing is just to understand initially what our charge was more than anything. We were given a few different charges, primarily by President Barron and our two executive co-sponsors, the former Senior Vice President for Finance and Business, David Gray, and Tom Fontaine, State College Borough Manager. The first one was really to look at bias and use of force data to better understand then sort of what was happening, right? Because the calls for things happening around the country said there's bias and use of force that's sort of disproportionately affecting communities of color. And so we wanted to figure out whether or not that was happening within the local area as well. The other one was to examine what progress had been made. Some of you may or may not be aware that in 2015, a previous task force by the same name was formed, and in 2016, they offered their report. Now, I'm going to get to some of the limitations of that report and what that meant at the time, but more than anything, we wanted to know what happened with the recommendations, what moved forward, what didn't move forward, the good, the bad, the ugly. We really wanted to figure that out. The last thing, which isn't a surprise, but was to offer actionable recommendations to improve the experiences of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color communities in their local area, specifically as it's related to policing and communities of color. Now, we set out to do this in a couple of different ways, right? Obviously, we had our weekly meetings, but more than anything, we expanded the task force because we realized that we were missing out on portions of our population. The previous iteration of the task force, as some of you who've had the chance to read the report, will call attention to the work that was done by State College Borough as far as their police department, as well as University Police and Public Safety. But we realized that if Penn State's working on this and we're trying to figure out what is the experience of policing in communities of color, then we can't only do that by saying only folks who work at the university or only folks who live in State College. We needed to expand it to include the local communities, including representation then from Patton and Ferguson. And that was the initial call. And then during the course of the meetings, we said, but folks live out in Belfast and Spring Township as well. And if we're going to do this, then we need to be as inclusive as possible. And so Chief Weaver was invited to be part of the conversation, as well was the officer in charge in Spring Township, so that way we could truly identify the experiences of what was going on with communities of color and policing in the local area. Legislative insights. We had folks from the legislature reach out who were expressing interest because they were working on similar police reform as well. The Pennsylvania Black Caucus on Police Reform, we had them come and have a conversation with us about some of the efforts they were doing. Because more than anything, right, if this is happening on a Commonwealth-wide level, that if all of Pennsylvania is thinking about this, then we want to make sure we're lockstep. We don't want to get into a situation where we actually are doing things differently than what might actually come down from Harrisburg or other areas. And so we had a really good conversation with them. And then continual feedback. We had some folks emailing me directly. We had folks asking to have conversations on the side, folks communicating with different members of the task force. All in all, we were striving to ensure we could incorporate as much insight and feedback as we could. Obviously, not every single thing that somebody reached out to us was made it on its way, but that sort of makes sense given the nature of the task force. Now, because of all that, we said, okay, how do we get this up and running? We had working subgroups. Not surprisingly, the working subgroup sort of mapped on to exactly the charge, right? The first one being progress made. What has happened? What did you find? What's different? What's not different? What do we need to continue doing? What do we not need to continue doing? The stoplight procedure, if you will. Current data analysis. Looking at the bias and use of force and trying to figure out what does the data actually say? What can we point to in the data so that way we have that as a reference point to understand truly what's going on? It's one thing to anecdotally say that we see these things happening, but it's another thing to say, here's what the data is showing for us. And then benchmarking and research. If I'm being overly candid, we had some really strong advocates on the task force who were saying, some things make us feel good. It makes us feel good to say that you need representation, that you need folks who look like you on the different police forces. That's great. Is that verified? Is that benchmarked? Is that research that actually is going to improve the experiences of BIPOC community members? If it's not, then we need to know that. If it is, then how do we validate that as a means to ensure then, if that's going to be a recommendation, we offer the why behind it. And so we set up a working group that was charged with looking at what other communities are doing, figuring out what's actually good out there and how we improve upon things as well. Now, my recommendations, the recommendations that came out from the task force, I'm going to get into in detail, but they were circled around 5 key things. The need for external consultants, a diversified workforce, data transparency, training, and the community. Now, findings since 2016. The first thing that I need to call attention to was the fact that it was a UPPS and State College Police Department centric. It did not include Patton, it didn't include Ferguson, it didn't include Bellefonte, it didn't include Spring. And so as we're looking to try to figure out what people did and what progress has been made, you have to acknowledge your limitations, right? We didn't ask Bellefonte to engage in these processes. We didn't ask Ferguson, we didn't ask Patton, and so that's important to call out. Now, what did we understand and what did we learn then from the 5 key takeaways from UPPS and State College Police Department? Well, the first one about promoting greater recognition and celebration of successes as a community. We found that agencies were engaged in various ways to highlight their efforts. Folks were setting up things in news articles. People were writing up letters of proclamation. Folks were trying to find ways to let the community member know. So, okay, that was happening. Increase the recruitment and retention of employees of color in police departments. Now, we learned in this process there are some challenges. I'll get into that in a little bit, but University of Police and Public Safety, for all intents and purposes, had some success. But they're also working around a different hiring system that allows them to engage in that. State College Police Department and others who volunteered the information were a bit more constrained. Provide consistent and ongoing education for Penn State students and employees, residents in the surrounding communities, and the local police departments. Now, we offer here that trainings are offered regularly and routinely, but it's only offered regularly and routinely, and people who attend are those who choose to attend. If we're being honest about it, right? If you're looking to learn something, then you're probably going to attend it. The bigger question is, how do you get that out to all areas of the community to ensure then that the folks who need to be there are the ones who are there? Target outreach and marketing to build improved stakeholder engagement. Now, we said movement toward transparency and engagement in community meetings, but here's the challenge with this. It's one of those pieces where for us, if you know that officers are engaged, that chiefs of police are engaged in community meetings, that they're engaged in, community diversity group, racial unity network, they're engaged in CCU, all these other things, then you know. But if you don't know, then you're asking, what are they doing? How are they giving back? How are they engaged? And so for us then, we need to be moving more towards transparency. And then lastly, establish baseline parameters and develop appropriate metrics to assess improvement. And we found that there were some efforts made between State College Police Department and UPPS. But more than anything, how do we help to advance that even further? Now, looking at the data, the findings of the currently available data, and I tell everybody all the time, I put this slide up here intentionally because I know it attracts a lot of attention within the report. And so don't want to hide from it. None of this information is new, it's inside the deep report, but we asked for the 3 to 5 year arrest data as well as the use of force data to understand whether or not there were any racial and ethnic disparities. Now, we did this by percentages, right? Legitimately speaking, we looked at percentages and we noticed there was an overrepresentation of Black and African American community members in arrest records and or use of force data. And the most simplest way I can explain it is this. If you have 3% Black and African Americans within your population, and they represent 75% of all arrests and use of force, you might understand that's a disparity, right? And so we're looking at stats, straight numbers. There's a lot more going on, and we'll talk more about that in a moment, but that's what we looked at. We also looked at it by all racial and ethnic groups. Was this just for Black African Americans, for Hispanic Latinx, for Asian Americans? And so what we found is most of the racial ethnic disparity came out from Black African Americans. From Bellefonte, we found that 4.4% Black African American population, but represent 9% of the arrest rate. No disparity occurred from the use of force data there, though, right? Because that doesn't show up here. For Ferguson, a 4.7%, for all intents and purposes, 5% Black African American population, 15% arrest rate, and 12% overall use of force rate. For Patton, 5% Black African American population, 18% arrest rate, 26% overall use of force rate. Spring, less than 0.5% Black African American population, 7.5% arrest rate. State College, 5% Black African American population, 16.3% overall use of force. I have been told that the arrest rate data is available. It was not made available at the time of the report, so I have not included it inside this presentation because I don't want to go back and try to add new stuff in. But moving forward, we hope to make sure we can update that information as well. University Police and Public Safety, 4.2% student population and 2.6% employee population at University Park campus, with the Black and African American population and 11.3% arrest rate and 15% overall use of force rate across all campuses. It's important to note that we were not provided access to the data at the time of developing the report that would have allowed us to better understand the arrest rate and the use of force rate specifically at University Park. That is something that we are hoping to dig deeper into. But what is important, some things that we pulled out here as well, firearm deployment was 19%, and equals 11, right? So we want to make sure we're looking at the actual raw numbers. It's the second most use of force tactic against Black African Americans. And the Asian population, by percentage, experienced a greater percentage use of force than did Black African Americans, at 39%. Now, I talk about this, and I pull this out because it's important that people see it. It's in the report. It's not hidden. But it's also what led us to some of the recommendations we had, right? Which I'll start with our first recommendation, an external consultant. I'll even jump down to the bottom here, which says that we need to look at the racial and ethnic disparity analysis. Because honestly, we're not sure what's going on. Given the data findings, are the disparities incidental? Are they intentional? Are there other data points that are needed to help us better understand some things? I think all of us can agree that football is back in State College in Happy Valley, and so some things happen, right? You get a lot more people in town. Are we talking about transient populations that are representing the most of the Black and African American use of force? I would ask you whether or not you think there's an influx of Black and African Americans in the community during sort of football games that's increasing this across the board. Possibly, I'm not sure. But we don't know. And so that's a recommendation. How can we find out better? How can we bring somebody in who is external to the community to help us better understand that? I'll jump back up to the top. Perceptions of community relations. One need only look at State College and the sort of report that they did that said, hey, we're asking people how they're doing, right? And the report came back fairly favorably. But when you start looking at the demographics of that report, you start asking yourself whether or not the BIPOC community participated in that report in high numbers. And so if folks are saying everything is good, but it's not including those who are saying things are bad, then we need to figure out what's going on. So a recommendation is, hey, we need to get somebody to come in here and help us better understand what's actually going on. What is the experience? What is the quantitative and qualitative data in this regard, particularly from domestic minoritized communities as well as non-U.S. citizens? Because we've heard mixed feelings and mixed interpretations and mixed expressions of interactions with police from both communities. Better understanding of working relationship between local police agencies with particular focus on large events. If you are a new student in town, a new employee in town, and your first experience with cops is during the football weekend, you're wondering, where did all these officers come from, right? Because you have no clue about these working relationships. However, if you're in the know, you understand that in order to manage the large crowds, University Police reaches out and asks for help from nearly every single local agency, including the state police at times, particularly for some of the night games and the big games as well. But how do we move more towards transparency to understand that, so that way we can convey that to other people? But let's have somebody come in and talk about how we do that appropriately. Case processing. Transparent insight into case processing, focusing on racial and ethnic and/or gender demographic differences. Quite frankly, we don't know. They didn't have access to that data, readily access to that data. So we're asking for somebody to come in to help us understand, are there different ways we should be looking at it? Is there something that might be happening within the case processing piece that we might need to pay attention to as well? Now, recommendation from a diversified workforce. Took some things out from the faculty realm as far as recommendations. One of them is a really crazy idea about a cluster hire, which is to say, listen, we understand that folks have different CBAs, different hiring schedules, different times in which things happen, but wouldn't it make more sense, as opposed to trying to overpopulate one department with more BIPOC officers, instead to say, how do we look to bring more people into the community? And how do we link up then, so that way the new officer, the new African-American woman officer that was hired at State College, knows that she has a support network either out here in Bellefonte, in Patton, and Ferguson, and so she can rely on other people who are having a similar shared experience, not only being new to the community, but a new officer in the community as well. Now, we acknowledge here and go much more deep in the report about the recognition of veterans' preference, right? There are certain things that are limiting the ability of diversifying the workforce, particularly around officers. The question is then, how do we overcome that in order to ensure we can actually further diversify it? How do we engage in more targeted recruitment practices then that allow our local agencies to accomplish a goal? One of those things that looking to work towards people with. A DEI director or equity officer, recognizing that we are encouraging an installment of an individual to help lead and guide these efforts. Because day in and day out, whose primary responsibility is this? Are you asking somebody who is already overworked, who's already understaffed, who already has a lot to do on their plate, to then go above and beyond and take on a task that at times, that's not their formal training, that's not their formal background? Why not then link up, engage in sort of shared resources to identify how all of us get together, pool our resources together to hire somebody that can serve as both an internal support as well as an external support. External for the minority-facing communities, minoritized communities, the BIPOC communities, internal support for police officers, helping to lead and guide then the DE&I efforts. Very similar, if you will, to the sort of role that Dr. Saria Chatters has over in SCASD. Very similar, if you will, to the role that Iris Richardson has with University Police and Public Safety. A mentorship program. Develop a program modeled off the Pennsylvania State Police program to improve hiring efforts. And what they found is that not only were folks excited about sort of joining state police, but they were excited that they had somebody that was going to help guide them. Somebody that was going to provide them with the experience they needed as a new officer to ensure then they would be successful. And if we know that's a possibility, then why not replicate it? Data consistency. Consistent collection across all local policing agencies. You can look at the report yourself and notice that the ways in which the data specifically is offered differs, particularly around use of force as well as demographic data. But we are encouraging folks to get together to develop and define a data collection standard. So that way, if we truly want to understand what's happening within our community, we can look at data from Belfast to Ferguson and understand how we compare differences from apples to apples right now, not trying to do it from oranges to tangerines. Also begin collection of traffic stop data, recognizing that there has been a shift within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to now begin collecting that information. And so for us, we're putting it in there and saying, hey, we support this recommendation to do it, recognizing it's already happening, but then also encouraging that sort of consistent collection of data. And then data management, transparent management and communication of data, meaning that folks are always going to ask questions about what's happening, what's going on. Is there racial disparity? Is there gender disparity? Are you targeting folks in this way? Rather than sort of waiting for those things to come, identify a way to be transparent about it. Share that information. And our recommendation from my role is to leverage university's resources of au pair. Allow folks whose primary job it is to manage data, manage really large data sets, identify a way that both protects the confidentiality and anonymity of those who have been involved in some of the incidents, right? But also allows the local community to understand then what's happening and understand what's going on. And then it provides you a consistent way, if the previous iterations are approved as well, to then report out on that data. Training. Not surprising, people across the country are offering the same sort of recommendations, but develop a specialized sector for matters relating to then mental health, substance abuse, calls involving juveniles, noise complaints, crisis negotiators, and domestic violence and assault. Saying that there should be individuals who, more than anything, are looking out for these particular pieces. Because doing so then suggests that somebody is specifically trained to understand what's happening in the mind of a juvenile right now, and how do I respond? And how do I respond differently to somebody who might be a victim of domestic assault, sexual assault. Crisis intervention team. We found out and learned that there was a crisis intervention team, and part of this process for us was a learning process. But if those of us who are charged with working on this task force had to find that out, then it might be time to reevaluate and refine sort of the CIT to ensure it's meeting its purpose. Not saying start over, not saying scrap it, but instead to refine and reevaluate it, because we want to then make sure that everybody's aware of it, that you have this resource that currently exists within the local community, so that way you can move forward from there. And then lastly, a continuous training, right? I think we all can agree that you should not have a once and done type training. It should be continuous. But continued de-escalation and in-service training, whether that be in person, utilizing new technology, local experts with particular emphasis on, hey, leverage what you have here. You have folks who are doing really great research around these topics as well, so leverage the faculty and staff who are engaged in these efforts. And then our last recommendation was around community engagement. And this one always trips people up, but for us, we're saying, listen, we're asking that folks be committed to encouraging officers to provide service hours, if you will, to local nonprofits. Now, what we also say is that officers should be able to choose it. They should be fully compensated for it. And it should be something that's part of the job, not something that's in addition to. And folks often ask me, well, what's the point of doing that? And the point for us is that it allows the community to begin seeing officers in different lights rather than only in response to certain incidents, right? That if I know the local officer is also involved inside my local church meeting, and he's showing up as part of that because that's part of his job. If I know my local officer is also part of the Center Safe meeting, and they're showing up because they're committed to this, that's also part of their job. All these things already have really great relationships, really great partnerships. We're just trying to find a way to make that more standardized, and to then ensure that folks know that officers are engaged in learning about what's happening broadly in the community as well. But more than anything, these are recommendations. Now, for us, for next steps, share the report with local community. Generate discussion and invite feedback. Listen, if you have any thoughts, comments, concerns, grumblings of the full report, please let us know. Shoot me an email. We'd love to hear that feedback. We want to respond to community calls for transparency by presenting the report like this at local council meetings and other key stakeholder groups. If you are part of other initiatives, other groups, reach out. Happy to do this exact same presentation there. Because more than anything, we want folks to know that we are being open and transparent with this. Continue and expand the task force work to support local policing agencies on realizing the success of these recommendations, right? Not saying that, okay, we've wiped our hands, we've given a report, and now go forth and do, but we're encouraging our executive sponsors to support the local agencies and helping to realize this by offering them either the resources of either university, of personnel, of people who are going to be committed to identifying ways to help accomplish all of these. And then also continue dialogue with local, statewide, and national groups, including the Pennsylvania legislative representatives that we had a chance to speak with regarding cross-collaborative efforts focused on police reform. We want to make sure we don't lose that, right? Because once again, the Commonwealth is moving forward. We want to make sure we can move forward in lockstep with them. Now, I put this slide up here. I recognize it is absolutely tiny and hard to read, but I want to give credit to every single member of the task force. Chief Weaver, which is part of that task force, thank you very much. And all those, because this was not some small undergoing. A lot of folks who are meeting with me Tuesday mornings, 9 o'clock, weekly, from the point in which we were formed and charged, and to the point in which we finally got our report out to our executive sponsors. And so I'm overly thankful for their ability and their commitment to help us realize this. And last question, honestly, is just any questions, comments, or concerns? Thank you.
You mentioned crisis intervention teams. Did you ever consider working with the sexual assault resource task force? These are nurses and police and Center Safe people who go together when they get a call about a sexual assault to actually go in and talk. Did you talk to them about what they could do? Did you talk to, have you sent the report to the Interagency Task Force on Tension, which is run by the Attorney General's Office, the PHRC, and the Penn State Police? It's a group that's run statewide. They meet monthly, and they look at all of these kinds of tensions, particularly this sort of problem. And they the U.S. Justice Department, those three that I mentioned, advocacy groups all meet together to try to help figure out how communities can better work together. They may have other ideas that have been used in other communities to help work with this issue. The third one is I'd like to give kudos to Sean because he has been with our police, has basically said that we are going to be community policing, and I can easily see this nonprofit support programs fitting in with the policies and programs he had. So thank you, Sean. And then the final thing I have is that I know that when you saw that tiny little list, there were the only policymakers on that task force outside of the university was State College Borough, as I understand. Mm-hmm. I think if this is going to go forward, whatever the new iterations are, that some of this stuff is policy level stuff based at a community level. Mm-hmm. You need to include some kind of elected representation from all the different communities in order to make sure that everybody's on board.
Cool. That's a lot to respond to, so I'm going to do my best. Yeah. I'll echo the easy one. Yes, thank you, Sean. That's easy. As far as how the report has been shared, if I'm not aware of the group, I can't share it, but I'd be happy to pass it along. It's public information right now out there from the Penn State News article, and so happy to pass that along to any groups. Regarding the CIT and other groups that we may have worked with, no, did not necessarily consult with them previously. However, have done the presentation to the group that you were talking about, which was invited to by Ann Ard, Executive Director of Center Safe, so that way we can have that conversation and also then get their input and insight as we continue. I think more than anything, right, sometimes I don't know where I don't know, and so I'm not aware of all the different agencies and different ways in which we can connect. But the beauty of, I think, this process now, and one of our final lines within the report was sort of don't let this die, right? Don't let this stop here, because these are just recommendations, but in order to accomplish these recommendations, we need to partner. We need to identify ways how we reach out to the community, because yes, we sat in a room with that. The reality is that somebody asked me to be chair. I said, okay. They said, here's your list. I said, oh, okay, here's my list of people who I'm speaking to, and we're trying to move this forward. I think there have been opportunities to bring on more folks, but I think the opportunity right now is to identify how we do that again, to ensure then that those who are policymakers within the local communities are able to enact this. But all in all, for us, it's a recommendation. And as we move forward to putting these recommendations into actions, I don't think we can profess to be able to accomplish this without sort of our ability to connect with others who are sitting in roles like all of you.
In terms of Center State,
Mm-hmm.
they have organized a monthly meeting. It's called the Center County Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence Task Force.
Mm-hmm.
That's comprised of police,
Mm-hmm.
advocates, and social service agencies throughout the county. That might be a good place for you to do a presentation.
Yep.
And they may also be able to provide you some of that training that you were talking about.
Yes, I did that presentation 2 or 3 Fridays ago, and so was invited by A&R to do that, which was a wonderful presentation, got some really great criticism, some really great feedback as well, and some really great insight on some other things that I have on my notes on my laptop on how we can, once we're able to move forward, pick this up.
Thank you.
Sure.
Dr. Cunningham, based on the feedback you've gotten so far, where do you think this will be about a year from now?
Sure. It's hard for me to speak into conjecture for things, right? I think the reality is that as we move forward with the task force report, we're likely moving forward to a committee that's going to help guide these efforts. I think probably the high level piece what a lot of people want to see is, hey, that bias in use of force data is really alarming. And so probably identifying a consultant to come in, engage in some in-depth analysis, so that way we have a report potentially a year from now that outlines exactly what's going on will probably be one of the key pieces. I think likely moving forward with the hiring of a DE&I director or equity officer is probably one of those things going to take a little bit more time. But if we're able to work towards it, then that means that at least we're all working in the same direction on that. I think some of the other pieces around training and education, right, are things that are happening, and those are things that folks can do really easily on a local level as far as identifying it. It's just making sure then that we're doing it in a consistent fashion. I think the data piece has been talked about, but one, finding the resources and convincing our colleagues to actually dive deep into that is another story. But one of those things that if I'm able to continue in this capacity as far as helping as a chair or co-chair, what that might look like, then advocating for as well. But more than anything, for me, I'm hoping that this continues to be an ongoing initiative, that we don't wait 5 years again before we sort of restart and relaunch and then offer another set of recommendations. Mm-hmm.
So what kind of resources do you see Bellefonte needing to provide to make this move forward?
That, unfortunately, I cannot answer. And I'm not sure you want me to, but I think it's going to be a matter of support, honestly, right? Personnel, I think people who are willing to engage in the conversation, and folks who are able and willing to support. If we're looking to have meetings, hey, we're probably not doing the weekly meetings anymore, but we're probably going to maybe do, hopefully, a monthly meeting, where somebody might sit in, provide insight, be able to relay information back to this borough, so that way folks can understand how do we move things forward. But we can't do this in isolation, right? I know a lot of folks sometimes think that, oh, university can change anything. Like, we can do a lot of stuff on university policy as far as University Park campus and Penn State, but when it comes to local community, we have to identify ways to work hand in hand, thus the whole town and gown relationship. And that, for me, is if we are able to develop those working relationships where we can partner truly, then I think that is the biggest resource we can utilize right now.
I guess I'll ask the money question.
Mhm.
As this task force moves forward, will there be financial discussions that come up to demonstrate how some of these changes would be paid for, either through grants or other means? I mean, we're tax-based and we have what we have. So if things are going to change to a certain extent, we're gonna have to know what that extent is.
I agree, and I think that for us is why we're looking at this from a sort of community-wide approach, right? It's one thing to say that, hey, Bellefonte, you need to go hire your own D&I director, find a salary, find the funding and everything for that, as opposed to saying, hey, Bellefonte, can you put in so that way all agencies can come together to identify this? And what might that look like given the level of resource in the community that exists out here, as well as giving others? Those are pieces, though, I think that as we sit down and create RFPs and sit down and create other proposals for what ultimately some of these pieces might look like, we'll need to come back and sort of say, hey, here's what we're talking about. Also, the university, because this is a partnership between town and gown, will also then need to leverage some resources financially and otherwise in order to help ensure that some of these recommendations come through. But these are all going to be conversations as we finally move into the next iteration of what this is, and then work, once again, hand in hand with community members to figure out how we accomplish this, recognizing some of the fiscal constraints.
Thank you.
Just one other thing related to what Randy just said. Each community is just starting the budget process for 2022.
Okay.
If you need financial resources, we need to know that sooner rather than later so we can look to see where we might be able to fix it, put it in the budget.
Yeah, I understand. It's one of those things where if I had the power to make that happen right now, I would, but I'm not sure that's within my area. And so, as we continue moving these conversations forward, how we do that and how much we can get back to you and how fast we can get back to you would be great. And we'll try to get that to you as fast as I can.
Have you had any discussions at the county level with county government?
I'll be honest, this is where my ignorance is going to come into play. I'm not sure what you mean by county level or county government.
County commissioners.
County commissioners, no, I have not. Personally, I have not.
I mean, a number of the issues, beyond the financial issues, a number of the issues you're talking about are what would be considered HR policies. And with all the department stovepipe, that basically that structure is going to greatly hinder the HR policies that you want to have everybody follow. It points more to we need a regional approach if you want to make this business happen.
Listen, you and I are on the same page. We do need a regional approach if we want to make this happen. And I think it's one of those folks that, hey, if I need to get in front of the county commissioners to engage in this conversation, share this presentation and say, looking forward to partner with you too, then I'm happy to do so.
Anything else from anybody? Thank you, Neil.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Appreciate it.
Next presentation is by Matt Bonchak and Don Gaetano from the Hartman Group Insurance.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Come on away. Oh, okay.
Should we start, Ralph, or just wait a little bit?
We'll give her a couple of seconds.
Okay. All right. Mhm. All right.
You can start.
Thank you. Yeah, as indicated, my name's Don Gaetano. I'm with the Hartman Agency. My colleague is Matt Bonchak, and we work with the borough on the property and casualty insurance program. First, thank you to the council for giving us some time tonight to go over the insurance program itself. Our thoughts on how best to kind of review this with you is that Matt, who works very directly with the borough, will review a summary of the insurance coverages. And we'll go through that kind of from a standpoint of reviewing the exposures associated with the borough in terms of what you have and what you do. And then we'll review also within that the insurance program that associates with those exposures. Another component that we'll touch base on is also the controls that the borough uses in managing the exposures themselves. But then the key piece, also though, is the insurance program itself. We'll review the summary of insurance, the summary of the programs, but we are going to take a deeper dive specifically into 3 areas that are of particular attention to political subdivisions right now. Public officials liability, law enforcement liability, and cyber liability are 3 areas that are, we feel, like worthwhile for the council to be a little bit even more deeply informed upon. So those are the areas that we'll kind of touch base on. But before we start, though, is there anything in particular that anybody here wants to make sure that we talk about tonight before we go through our agenda? Okay. Matt will start taking us through, and please, at any time, feel free to interrupt with a question.
Hi, everybody. So, as Don alluded to there, the first page of your packet is where we wanted to start the discussion with a higher elevation overview of the exposures that are insured by the insurance program we have put together for Bellefonte Borough. And this is something that's been put together, tweaked, and modified over the years as needed in concert and consultation with borough staff. And we meet regularly to discuss claims activity and to address coverage concerns and needs as issues arise and things change over time. Looking down through the handout that you're looking at with the coverage summary on the first page, I want to touch on a few items, and of course the highlighted items we'll be discussing in a little more depth. The main thrust of the policy falls into really 3 areas. The first section of coverages, starting with property, including mechanical breakdown, which all we mean there is that's an additional component of property coverage that's important to have. We don't need to get into detail, but it's included within your property coverage. We have blanket property coverage you see there, total value of about $48 million across 35 locations, which quite obviously is a substantial amount of property insurance to have, because the borough has a substantial amount of property assets. What I want to note there is that those values, because they are so high and because they're across so many locations, we arrange with the insurance carriers that we have in place to provide physical appraisals for those properties at least every 5 years to ensure that they are insured to the proper values for the replacement cost coverage that we have in place. We have additional coverage in certain instances there for different exposures, but the main general blanketed property value coverage we have there is at the $48 million. The inland marine is the total amount of mobile equipment that we have specifically insured. So that's all of the streets equipment, everything that's out and about. It's essentially property coverage for things that move. We have $1.173 million insured there, plus a substantial amount of small tools coverage for everything valued below $5,000, which is a lot of what the borough's tools and equipment is blanketed underneath that. We have crime coverage, and these are limits that have actually been recently increased, and some of them work in concert with the cyber liability coverage at the bottom, notably the funds transfer fraud and the computer fraud. We also have employee dishonesty, which includes faithful performance and includes public officials as part of that employee dishonesty coverage, which is essentially employee theft coverage. We have that for $300,000. And then we get into the meat of the broader liability coverages. And that's what we're going to talk a decent amount about. So I can move a little bit past that, except to note we have $1 million per occurrence, $2 million in your annual aggregate. These are all annual policies that renew every year. We just recently renewed it for 21-22 for the public officials, employment practices, and law enforcement. And then general liability as well carries that $1 million per occurrence for any one occurrence, $2 million in the annual aggregate. We insure 63 individual automobiles at $1 million of liability, combined single limited per occurrence for your business auto. And we also notably work with consistently on claims tracking and ensure your workers' compensation, as well as the volunteer workers' compensation through the State Workers Insurance Fund. And I listed there as a note of the exposure, how we have the payrolls broken down by their classification as required by the Workers' Compensation Bureau for Pennsylvania, which is just a decent way to outline the overall exposure you have for the total amount of payroll, because that's how workers' compensation is rated and priced, is based on the payroll per category. And we have an umbrella coverage, so for every liability coverage I listed thus far, the umbrella coverage listed there applies over top of that. And we also then, as part of this package with Travelers, have cyber liability coverage, which it's called cyber liability. That's a little misleading because it also includes first-party coverages for the expenses you incur as the result of a cyber event, as well as liability you may have to outside third parties that claim they suffered a loss as the result of an intrusion, a data breach, or something along those lines. But we have $1 million total aggregate limit there, and like I said, first and third party expenses are covered. That is the very executive summary of the broad strokes of the program. There's more minutia and detail within each one of those coverage lines, but I just wanted to pause in case anybody had any questions about the nature of any of those coverages, the limits we have, or the exposures that are associated with them. Yes?
This would be the borough and also the Bellefonte Water Authority included in this?
Correct. So we'll get into that with the public officials coverage, but you'll see specifically within the public officials and the definition of who is an insured under the policy that it includes your boards, which includes authorities that are within your purview. But the borough of Bellefonte is the first named insured on the policies.
Right. So, but I was thinking, when you mentioned cyber, in the event that somebody would,
Like the SCADA system or something like that?
Yes.
Right, absolutely. So we have a traveler's, it's called a package policy, and the named insured is Bellefonte Borough and the your boards, and we have actually the water authorities an additional named insured on the traveler's package policy. The cyber for the municipal program that Travelers has that we've put together for you includes the cyber underneath that same package heading. So it's under a similar policy number and includes the same named insured status for the water authority.
okay,
We have them specifically listed out to make sure, is the short answer there.
okay.
Can I ask what the total cost of our policy is for the year?
Number, now it'd be, all these have different numbers. If you're looking for the combined number. I don't know if you want.
I'm asking because, as these gentlemen know, and the rest of the council probably doesn't know, we're involved in a lawsuit over one of the contractors down at the Water and Sewer Authority, water treatment plant. And I don't want to mention names or get too detailed about this because it's ongoing. My biggest problem is that this company refused to represent the Water and Sewer Authority in this lawsuit and will not cover any losses if we have any. Now, my interpretation of the contract or of this policy was that if it's not covered in the policy, then if it doesn't state in there, we're not going to cover this or that or whatever, then it is covered, and it doesn't say anything that they're not going to cover us in a lawsuit. My understanding also with these gentlemen, that one person, and I believe it's Philadelphia, not where it was, one person made that determination that the way the lawsuit reads, that they're not going to cover us. So why are we paying a couple $100,000 a year, I don't know what it is, and we're not getting any representation from our
Let me clarify,
insurance?
these are the agents.
I know,
The carrier said they were not gonna cover that.
but they're the ones that are getting the money.
Yeah, I
Right.
realize that.
And to me, we're not getting any service. I still don't understand, this is going on for quite a while now.
I was going to ask the same question.
Yeah.
but-
So, members of the authority are not happy with the insurance company for not protecting us when we thought we were going to be protected. So,
I don't know if you, I
just
know
want to get
you're
it out
not,
there so council knows about it.
I know you're not prepared. If you wanna come back another time and speak to that, you're welcome to.
We can, so
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be, if you want us to take a deep dive into
Right.
it, it would be better to come back. I will make a comment that the insurer issued a reservation of rights letter to reserve their rights under the policy, and then they disclaimed coverage. And this goes back, I have to admit, this is why I need to get a deeper dive, because I'm going on a one-year memory, but as I recall, they were denying coverage, indicating that it was a contractual liability matter dealing with a breach of contract allegation.
Yes.
And there's a breach of contract allegation that does often happen, and I'm not defending the insurer. As far as I'm concerned, I stand with you, I mean, period. But I'm just explaining. The presentation of information from the insurer was that there's often conflict between like an entity that hires a contractor and the contractor themselves as to whether or not they have fulfilled all the obligations under the contract. And for those reasons, the insurer, they just say, hey, listen, this is a contract between two independent companies, and you guys have to hash it out yourselves, as opposed to it being like an insurance claim for a wrongful act, which would be a specific error and omission, by the borough. So I say that in terms of, this goes back from a year ago, as I recall from reading that, of their reasoning behind it. I share that based upon to share information, not to support the carrier position or to say that this is right or anything like that, but just to offer that. We'd be happy to, to come back when you would want to take a deeper dive into that, to review it though.
Yeah, and I only had to say, I don't want to jump too far into specifics, just like this gentleman hesitated in bringing names of parties involved or specifics of the situation in play. But we certainly can review that ahead of next month's meeting if you want us to present then, and make sure that what we presented spoke directly to the concerns addressed here, gave us a chance to do a thorough review, and make sure that we review our presentation ahead of time with borough staff to make sure that nothing was discussed that caused any discomfort.
You may want to do that in executive session.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I'm thinking.
Anyway, I'm just concerned and upset that we had no idea till this came up that we weren't covered for that type of situation. It was determined just on this situation. That's what I understand, how the insurance company can say you're covered, but well, no, we determined you're not covered. So to me, it was arbitrary. And I couldn't never get any information out who actually made the decision till we could contact them and talk about it.
Well, we brought these folks into our authority meeting, but I think this should go to executive
Yeah.
session.
Yes.
With what Blake brought up, I'm concerned, what else might be out there that isn't covered that we don't know about?
You
You
gotta-
gotta take a deep dive, go a little deeper.
You gotta read the policy.
I understand that, but does it, if it's not written in there and they make a decision, there should be some type of guideline that we go by so that we know what our coverage is. We just
Right. We
don't
should have
pay
some
money,
arbitration or something.
we think we're covered and then we're not.
Right.
And we need to know how to prevent it from happening again,
Yeah.
and we've got no answer.
Right.
But that was a good point to brought up because I didn't know we were being sued.
News to me.
Yeah, that's why I want everybody to know what's going on.
Continue.
Okay.
We didn't mean to stumble you.
No, listen, we make no claim that these insurance policies don't contain some exclusions or that cover every possible scenario and hypothetical out there. Even when we move into the next page and we look at some of the coverages in a little more detail, the practical scenarios and claims responses you see below are hypotheticals that are, coverage would be determined, in every case on a case-by-case basis. That's why our standard answer is this covered is, it depends on the specifics of the situation because the way that a claim is framed by the claimant and the particular circumstances all impact ultimately what's contained within the coverage forms, and you marry those two to determine whether or not coverage exists. So why don't we transition this right into and move into the next page, which is the public officials liability. We included 2 sections, but for each of these sections, we're looking at demonstrating to you a brief glimpse into the policy documents themselves. And this is what we break down when we get into a claim scenario. From these policy documents, and I made some highlights, who's an insured, what is insured, and a practical example. The other thing that ties in with the public officials liability briefly is employment practices liability. That is a separate coverage part. I didn't want to include too many policy snips in here that would get too noisy for you. They sort of marry together, but you have independent $1 million limits for each. But you can see under the public officials liability, which is relevant specifically to you folks, your boards are insured, your lawfully elected and appointed officials, executive officers or directors are also insureds under that who is an insured section. That determines who does this coverage apply to and when. And then what is insured, I should say, includes the insuring agreements. Those sums the insured becomes legally obligated to pay as damages because of loss to which this insurance applies. And that includes essentially duty to defend when applicable, when the coverage is triggered without exclusion, and then the result of that suit, so damages. So lawyer costs and ultimately damages that would be awarded, or settlement costs if it comes to that. Under these coverages, you'll see in there wrongful act under quotations. That's what is insured for to investigate any wrongful act or claim or settle any claim or suit. A wrongful act is broadly defined by the policy form as any act, error, or omission, but there are exclusions that apply then to that coverage subsequent to that, like intentional wrongful acts or essentially criminal acts. This doesn't insure against criminal behavior if that should occur by a public official by accepting monopolized bids or something like that. That wouldn't happen, but that wouldn't necessarily be covered. The practical example we listed below, this is an example of a denial of a permit for a marijuana dispensary, and then that dispensary comes back and claims you unlawfully or wrongly denied them the ability to be granted a business license, thus they lost income, and it's an injunctive claim and a monetary claim for damages. In that claim scenario, relevant to all the other exclusions if none were triggered, the defense of that claim, if it were litigated, and any ultimate awards or settlements would be part of the coverage form. Now, because this is obviously the public officials coverage, I just wanted to pause again and see if anyone had any questions. The employment practices coverage, as it dovetails in, pertains mostly to coverages of either discrimination, harassment, unlawful hiring and firing, termination, or retaliation against employees. So it's for liability in your capacities as employers of either applicants of or employees of the borough. And that's typically where those claims come into play.
So just one really quick, simple question. Are these 2 guys covered under this or the employees section?
They are covered if they under the employee section. So if they brought if they were the subject of a claim because of what was alleged to be their wrongful act, they would be covered by the public officials coverage. If they themselves brought a claim against you as the borough council for your wrongful act, then you would be covered. So I guess it depends on the scenario and what position they're in then as to how coverage would apply.
But they would not be covered under the employees' liability section. They would be covered under this public officials section.
Employees' liability, if you're referring to whether it's a general liability more so.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because what you're talking about is that they actually are in a dual capacity. They're both employees as well as public officials.
Mm-hmm.
And if indeed, maybe if you don't mind, I'll explain it a different way in terms of if as an employee, if they were injured in the course of employment, they would be an employee and covered under the workers' compensation policy that covers the borough. If there's an allegation made against them in their capacity as a public official, they qualify as an insured under this policy. So I'm sorry, the answer really is both. They're actually covered as both. It depends upon the nature of the claim that would be filed.
Okay, thank you.
It's all situational on what the nature of the allegation, the claim is, as to which coverage applies and what coverage will be triggered. And with that, I think we can move to the law enforcement liability, which we just wanted to bring in here. The same two sections, they're split out a little differently, but who is an insured and what is insured? And essentially, these are both quote-unquote wrongful act coverages for act errors and omissions. And for both the public officials and law enforcement, for the public officials, it's for your liability when acting in the capacity as a public official. For law enforcement liability, it's for those acting in their capacity as law enforcement officers or law enforcement representatives, or in your capacity as the managers of the law enforcement for the Borough of Bellefonte, from more of a policy capacity. This provides coverage for wrongful acts, errors, or omissions, for wrongful acts in relation to law enforcement coverage. In the next page, you'll see there the practical example and the coverage response, which I think is the most effective way to communicate what the law enforcement liability covers. But essentially, if one of your officers, in the course of their employment and acting within the scope of their duties as a police officer, encounters a situation which is then later alleged to be a wrongful act. The example we have here includes body-worn cameras and a tackled teenager who was mistakenly identified as being involved in a criminal act. They come back and sue for the damages to their laptop or bodily injury, personal injury in some capacity. Coverage would then trigger for the duty to defend on behalf of the borough and the officer specifically, and for any damages that ultimately would be awarded there. That's the crux of the coverage and the most concise way, I think, to define it. But we just wanted to put that to your attention and see if you had any questions specifically about those coverages. Yes.
Now, you're saying that would be a limit of 1 million?
Per occurrence.
Per occurrence.
Per occurrence, 2 million aggregate, but you also have the umbrella coverage, which lays over top of that. So it actually extends that upward.
So that would take us up to maybe 4 to 5 million.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. Any other questions on the law enforcement coverage? If not, we're going to move finally to the cyber coverage, and you can circle back at the end here with any coverages generally you have. So in terms of the cyber liability, why we wanted to identify this is one, municipalities, if you've been paying attention to the news, have been targets of cyber attacks recently. The exposure environment is high and unfortunately getting worse with more bad actors out there. Claim costs continue to be troublesome, and it's one of the spotlight coverages that attention's on because of increased claims nationwide, as well as the let's say the new nature of cyber liability. It's a coverage that didn't exist 20 years ago, and for the insurance industry, which is more of a slow-moving monolith than it is a fast and nimble industry from a coverage standpoint. It's important to us to make sure that we watch the coverage closely because it's changed substantially even over the last 5 years, and to make sure you're placed with a carrier we trust in the event that this happens, considering the exposure environment and the number of cyber events that have happened in municipalities over the past several years, and unfortunately the fact that they don't seem to be slowing down necessarily. So we have there the who is an insured section yet again, but I will say from a cyber standpoint, this is less of a liability coverage simply because of the way the courts are currently structured to handle liability claims against cyber or in relation to cyber or data breach events. More of a first-party coverage area where we're worried about protecting the borough from financial loss as the result of high costs that might be incurred from, say, a ransomware claim, which is the hot item that's happened recently. And we put a practical example down there of a ransomware act, a demand for $50,000 in Bitcoin, and all the associated expenses with getting back up and running as a borough, identifying any data that might have been lost, handling any PR that you might have to do with the community after a ransomware attack. It's a real concern, and we just wanted to lay out below there some of the potential response from the bottom, from paying the ransom itself to handling some of the costs associated with, depending on how those costs break out. They could be identifying and notifying people whose personal data has been stolen, like employees. It could be the public relations, restoring certain data that you weren't able to recover even after the encryption key was unlocked. There's a lot of different costs that can incur after a cyber claim. And I think there's a couple key points with first-party coverages, but what I'd really like to hit on is that Travelers in and of itself is an industry leader in the cyber coverage area in terms of claims handling specifically. And that's where the rubber meets the road with a lot of this stuff, understandably, and where our concern comes that, in a ransomware attack where I don't think anybody has a great feel for what exactly to do in the wake of that. Whether you're a municipal employee or an insurance company employee or whatever the case is, we want you to be able to connect quickly with experienced data breach coaches who can walk you through the process, make sure the relevant coverages are triggered, and that you get everything you need under the policy if possible. And part of that is managing the exposures and communicating that with the borough. So as a recent example, multi-factor authentication has been highly identified as the lack thereof being one of the highest factors in the risk environment for ransomware. If you don't have multi-factor in place, the Colonial Pipeline's a good example where they didn't. That is where most ransomware hackers have been able to infiltrate a system, install their hardware, and then be able to later post the ransom. So Travelers, because they handle so many claims, because they're experienced, they identified, and I have an info sheet here I can hand around, but they identified about 94% of ransomware victims investigated didn't use multi-factor. So they installed it as a highly critical recommendation at the renewal period. We worked with borough staff to identify the multi-factor, look through the different options as far as it affected ultimately the premium you paid and what the relevant considerations were, because there were some costs associated with making the adjustments necessary to install the relevant levels of multi-factor authentication within the borough systems, make some other adjustments, which Ralph could probably more thoroughly speak to in terms of how the different systems that the borough used from an IP perspective work together. And then in an alignment of interest, Travelers wants to have it in place. It's good for the borough's overall cyber risk management to have it in place. And now it's enabled them to stay with a A+ cyber carrier. Yeah.
So by doing that, you're basically providing us an IT service, a consulting service on what we have to do. And is there anything in our contract with you that then says that we will not be held liable by any other party for potential damages? I'm concerning, like, say one of our customers or a borough resident tries to hit us with a negligence type.
Sure.
Say that we were negligent with our cybersecurity.
So you have $1 million limits for third-party liability claims.
Okay.
And those third-party liability claims, for a third party, a vendor, or an individual whose social security number, unfortunately, was part of a data breach. We have $1 million to handle those claims. What we have found in our own investigation, essentially, is that those claims aren't likely to be successful because of the trail of evidence that the claimant has to provide to attach their identity theft back to the actual data breach. That being said, there's a cost to defend those claims, and that's part of the coverage included here.
I'm sorry, we need to close it
Yeah, I was
up.
going
Sure.
to close this up because we're 10 minutes behind. But thank you.
I want to thank you, Matt and Dawn, for coming in this evening. We have made those changes that Matt has talked about, including combining the police server underneath the borough server. We're using an IT company we've used for a few years now, but in conjunction with the advice from Travelers. So it's kind of a team effort to make these changes, but we're very confident we're headed in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, and sorry about the extra 10 minutes.
Thank you. We'll be in touch about maybe another.
Absolutely.
Another
Thank you, everybody.
session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. So it's 7:39. I call the Bellefonte Borough Council meeting to order. We will start off with the Pledge of Allegiance, moment of silence, and then a roll call.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alrighty. Mr. Eaton?
Here.
Ms. Ombosky?
Present.
Mr. Johnson?
Present.
Mr. Prendergast?
Here.
Mr. Halderman?
Present.
Ms. Tosti Vasey?
I'm here.
Ms. Cleaton? Mr. Brackville?
Here.
Ms. Abbott?
Here.
Mayor Wilson?
Present.
Approval of the minutes, we need a motion and a second.
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Eaton,
I have a correction.
okay, go ahead.
That's on the last line. It says term limit rotation. Council chair and co-chair should be president, vice president, and pro tem.
So you're adding pro tem. You're adding pro tem. Okay,
Thank you.
That's what I had suggested.
okay.
Yeah, that's the ad hoc, or the executive committee.
So, any other changes? Seeing none, all in favor with the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? So moved. Okay. Additions to the council meeting agenda?
There are a couple items under consent agenda. We added a Stover legal bill invoice in the amount of $119. Under communications, we're adding two letters, I just mentioned now real quickly, two letters regarding the parking issues in town, specifically around the Diamond. There's information from the Pennsylvania Municipal League about their symposium coming up in October, as well as their Municipal Leadership Summit also in October. Under Office of Community Affairs, we're going to mention about the League of Women Voters banners request. I think that's all I have for now.
And then I'm going to add something about first responders under my report.
Thank you.
Oh, your Center Region.
Well, yeah, I think under written communications, I believe you received the Center Region Code Administration reports. We're going to list them under special committees. They should have been in your materials when the agenda was sent out. I think that's everything.
Do we have any public comment? Please come up to the podium, give your name, your location, and and this is about something that's not on the agenda. If it's,
Something that's on the
It's
agenda.
not.
It's about a hard application.
okay, so it's on the agenda.
Yes, it's
Okay.
under the consent agenda, so.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so my name's Alex Germano. I live at 221 North Allegheny. I'm a physician, family physician with Penn State Health. My wife and I have lived there for about the past 5 months. Previously lived on High Street, and we were there for about 4 years. So my concern regards a hard decision regarding some projects that the Verizon building is undertaking. And specifically, they're putting some louvers on the side of the building that faces our house. Our house is just 10 feet from their building. The first thing that we have an issue with is the aesthetics. We think that HARB should hold a Verizon, a company as the way they do private citizens. The private residents, they hold them to a high standard as far as historic windows go. I think these louvers are kind of an eyesore. They have an industrial look to them. And if you look on the front of the building, they're kind of in disrepair. You'll see birds' nest in them. They have plywood with just like a big opening. It's you know, compared to what private residents are, it's I don't think acceptable. I also would like the council to consider putting a hold on any decisions regarding these modifications until a noise pollution situation is assessed. I have a concern, one of the current louvers that was put on there years ago, I guess, faces one of our guest bedrooms on the first floor. And my dog goes into every room in the house. For some reason, he doesn't cross that threshold into that room. And it's because for about 15 to 30 seconds in the summertime, multiple times throughout the day, the louvers make a loud noise. It's not like a hum of an air conditioning, it's a big bursting noise. And so the plan that they currently have is to put the louvers on the second floor windows across the side, which again is 10 feet away from our house. That's where all our bedrooms are. We have concerns about that because our guests wake up in the middle of the night to these sounds. And so, you know, I think that if the council has any power in this to put a consideration before making any approvals of these, to at least do a sound pollution assessment, you know, for us. And I'm sure that you guys like your sleep and can empathize with our situation. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, we will move to the consent agenda. And just note, since we just talked about HARB, that in this consent agenda are 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 5 HARB items that if you passes on the consent agenda, they would be as fully recommended and described in the HARB notes. If you all want to make an exception, you would need to remove this particular one or any others from that review before we have a motion to accept.
President, I'd like to remove 145 High Street for discussion.
No, it's 217 North Allegheny is the one he's talking about. Are you talking about that one or this?
No, I'm talking 145 West High
Okay.
Street, Suzanne's Cuts.
Okay,
And I would like to remove the 217 North Allegheny Street, Verizon.
Okay, Johnson's removing 217 North Allegheny, and Brackville's removing 145. Okay, so we need a motion to accept all the remaining ones under the consent agenda.
I'll make that motion, Eaton.
Eaton
I'll second it, Clayton.
and Clayton. All in favor? Please say
Aye.
aye. All opposed? So moved. Okay, so Randy, since you were first, go ahead with.
Yeah, I just want a clarification because I looked at the picture and it says that installing a mini split unit to be mounted on the High Street side, the picture shows it on the Spring Street side. So I just wanted that clarification.
I think it's a Spring Street, but Gina, if you want to clarify?
It is the Spring Street side,
Okay.
so that could be a typo. I could look into that. I know that Walt, he had mentioned something about High Street, but it was very clearly that the mount would be on the Spring Street side underneath the
fire escape?
fire escape. So, or that was the original, and then what they proposed was to have it underneath coming and have the line coming into the window, and they weren't sure which pane the window would go into, and I'm just gonna work with Brian Veneta on which window, but yes, that is on the Spring Street side, so,
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, are you ready to move that one ahead?
Yeah.
So we need a motion for that
I'll
one.
make the motion that we approve this change from High Street to Spring Street side for 145 West High Street.
Okay, and second,
I'll second it.
Prendergast. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, so moved. Done.
Okay, I'm sorry, sir, I didn't catch your name.
Alex.
Huh?
Alex Germano.
Alex, based on his concerns here tonight, I have to agree with what he said. I think it needs further review with the noise pollution that this louver or louvers is creating for his residents. So I don't know what the next step could be. The other thing I have a concern about is he brought to the attention of the maintenance failure of the existing louvers in the front of the building, and I don't know if we can get with code with that, or how we address those
Well,
things.
the simplest and easiest way is contact the owner's representative, which I believe is an architect or engineering firm
Okay,
that submitted the plans, and see if we can get some cooperation about the two items, noise and property maintenance.
okay,
And that would be the easiest path of least resistance, versus going, looking at what codes are on the books and so on.
Okay.
Which, we can mention that, but we would like to get their cooperation. So I'm okay if the board wants to table this and give us a couple weeks to work with the owner and see what we can accomplish.
Would that help you?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Is it intake louver or exhaust louver? You know?
I don't know.
I would guess, buddy, it's
Well,
exhaust.
the reason I'm asking that, so if it's an intake louver, then it's not gonna be any sound or anything. But if it's an exhaust louver with an exhaust fan there, depending on how big the fan is, the CFM, he's either gonna get a lot of air coming out of that towards his house, or a lot of noise one or the other.
Well, they could redirect it somewhere else, maybe out through the
Well,
roof.
that's what I'm saying,
or-
if they still use that basement for batteries or whatever's in there now, I don't know, it's been a long time since I've been in there. But they could go out the back of the building,
Yeah.
depending if I remember, that was a big room
Yeah.
down there.
Then they put a generator in, 6-8 months ago in the back.
Yeah,
We're
So-
still working on it.
Okay. Anyway, there's less neighbors to the back, or
Yeah.
even the parking lot side of the building.
Another side.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gina, were these additional louvers more aesthetic than
Functional.
functional?
I honestly don't know. When they were presenting, they didn't get into the details of what they would be for. They did definitely clarify that the units they were putting on the top would be functional and make sound. I know that the louvers that they presented were matching the already existing louvers, so I don't know whether they intended them to be functional or aesthetic.
So that's a question that we're going to
We
need to find out.
can do that.
Do we have a decibel ordinance?
We do. It's very hard to enforce noise levels.
Well, it sounds like
We
this
had
was,
some discussion a while ago about changing the noise ordinance so it didn't have that decibel
No,
in there.
no, the courts have said you have to have a decibel level, but you have to have a meter that's tested, at a certain so many feet away from the property line.
right.
No,
It's-
that's not.
It's not practical. It's
Well,
not-
but the courts have not said you don't necessarily have to have a dB level
That's right,
because.
I remember that discussion, and there was.
I know it's difficult to enforce, that's our understanding.
Because that's what happens in new developments. New developments are basically operating on the basis of saying you can't hear your neighbor. You have the right not to hear your neighbor. So in new developments, that can work. For us, the issue is we have the traffic noise. Now, Alex, if you have an iPhone? Yeah, and how far are you from the Verizon building?
10 feet.
Yeah, 10 feet.
Okay. You can determine how much the level is. We can email back and forth. I can give you the number. You can measure it with your iPhone. But you also have the problem, your dog says he's hearing a tone. That's why it's not going in there.
Yeah.
Are
Okay.
you talking about a civil matter or something we have on the books?
We don't have anything in the books, and that's
We
the
don't have
thing.
anything enforceable on it.
We don't have anything enforceable, that's the problem.
That is the problem.
Right.
And it's because even if we had it on the books, it's very hard to enforce and get a successful case
Right.
processed.
And I mean, we're almost in the case of trying to work with the owner
Yes.
to
That's-
eliminate the problem,
that's
which is what you were, where you were going, Ralph. And I don't mean to argue, but I think working with Alex, we can help him
Yeah.
get some information to work with
Yes.
the building owner
Yeah.
to mitigate those problems.
Yeah, I mean, if they could go on the other side of the building, it would be fine. I do know that they're putting a lot of new air conditionings on the roof as well, which, you know, I mean, that's probably gonna be another issue too, because this isn't like a family home where you have just one unit. This is gonna be,
Yeah.
I can imagine, a lot, so.
When you guys talk to the engineer or architect or whatever, those units that they're putting on the roof, the specifications will give you a decibel rating on them.
Okay.
And ask him if there is a problem with the neighbors where they can put baffles up there to take the noise away a little bit.
Okay.
Need a motion to table?
Yes, guess
I'll
what?
make that motion to table.
Right, Bill?
I'll second it.
That's for
And the gas.
217 North Allegheny Street.
Prendergast. All in favor of the motion to table until we get these questions answered, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So moved.
We'll keep you in the loop.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay. Now moving on to written communication.
Okay, the first one is a letter from Downtown Bellefonte Incorporated. Well, it's an email with the summary of the parking study that they performed, and the results are there before you. I know that the Streets Committee has taken a look at it, and we'll probably discuss it further, but it's there as part of the input process about before any changes are made up around the Diamond area or formally changing any parking systems you have in place now. As noted, I don't believe there's any action other than it's already gone to the Streets Committee. So the next item is the Howard Fire Company is requesting the fire police assistance for their annual Pumpkin Chunking Fall Festival event, which is Saturday, October 16th, 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m.
So we need a motion to approve the use of our fire police if they are available.
I'll make that motion.
Prendergast?
I'll second it,
And
Clayton.
Clayton. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So moved.
Next item is the annual Halloween parade, which is a request from HBI, Historic Bellefonte Incorporated. The parade, which the date was previously reserved, but not the parade route, is Saturday, October 30th. The parade route would start at the elementary school, go south on Allegheny to West High, and end up at Talleyrand Park, where they will have the rest of the fall festival activities, including Halloween, for their fall festival. Again, all Saturday, October 30th.
So,
I'll make the motion to approve the October 30th parade. That will start at the elementary school down North Allegheny to West High and end at Talleyrand Park. I have comments after that.
Okay.
I'll second Brackville.
Okay, Johnson and Brackville? Go ahead, Doug.
I just want to make sure that they're in touch with Chief Weaver to make sure that all the streets are closed and they have proper coverage. I know they will do that anyhow, but that's my only concern.
Yeah, they put in a letter to work with Karen and Chief of Police Office to coordinate PennDOT permits
Great.
for doing the parade.
Okay.
Do we need to do anything about COVID precautions or anything?
It hasn't been anything for outside events yet.
Okay,
So right now, we don't have any.
no problem, just checking.
I do have a question. When I was reading the information, they're asking for the road closures all the way down to Bishop Street. And it looked like from the letters from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., which goes much beyond the parade itself. I'm assuming they're requesting that full closure time for the safety of the kids between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. while they're trick-or-treating at the stores. Is that true? And the second part of that is, does your motion include the closures until 4 p.m.?
Well, it did, but if
Okay.
you would like to modify that, that's a good question, Joanne.
Okay.
So
I don't know the answer to
We'll have
that.
to work with Sally Hauser on that answer. I did not read it that way, that they wanted the whole town shut down the whole day.
Yeah, that was why I was kind of
Yeah.
preferring to go to Streets Committee so we could get these questions
We
resolved.
could do that, or we
Typically,
could.
it is not,
Yeah.
Right.
but it does
But that
read that
letter
way.
is, it does read that way.
Okay.
So do
So
we want
based on that, if it's, I mean, I don't want to, if they modify the time, are we acceptable to it?
I would say conditional approval upon meeting with the streets to work out the details.
Is that okay with, does
Yeah,
that
so
make
is-
sense?
we just need a modification. We need an amendment
What do you-
I'll make the amendment
to go through Streets Committee for final approval.
I'll second that amendment.
don't want to deprive the kids of Halloween.
Absolutely not.
Prendergast and Johnson. Okay, do we have any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, so moved. Now for the poll minute with the conditional approval. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, so moved. So we'll get Sally to come into a Streets
Mhm.
Committee meeting.
Okay. Next item, the Bellefonte Area School District Class of 2022 would like to have a walk-run 4K event called the Reindeer 4K Run Walk, and that would be Saturday, December 11th. And they're looking for approval, and they're actually working with Victorian Christmas on this, which is usually the second weekend in December.
So if you read the letter, they don't have any details, they said they still need to finalize, so I would like to refer this to Streets Committee for review with
Mhm.
HBI and flesh out the plans and then make a recommendation.
So, good.
Could we approve the date, at least to give them the opportunity to have the,
I guess we could.
Yeah,
Yeah, we could just.
I'd like to make the motion to approve the Saturday, December 11th date for the Bellefonte Area School District Class of 2022, the Reindeer 4K Run Walk.
I'll second Brackville.
Okay, so Johnson and Brackville.
And that is based on them meeting with us with more details.
Yes, to go to Streets.
So if we could invite them to the streets meeting or their representative, that might be helpful.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, so moved.
Thank you. Just, I mentioned earlier, there's 2 letters about parking concerns, suggestions, options for the Diamond area or downtown. They're there for your review. I know we're not taking any really official action. Later on, you'll hear about public hearings, public input meetings that will be forthcoming. The next item is a Pennsylvania Municipal League notice about a symposium they're having, and there's information in your materials and in your agenda about it. It's scheduled for Thursday, October 21st, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. You can go in person or attend virtually. And also, similarly, the Pennsylvania Municipal League has their Municipal Leadership Summit, October 7th through the 9th. And again, it's hybrid as well.
Any questions? Any other written communications? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Office of Community Affairs. Gina?
I don't really have much to report. I sent my memo to you all. The Planning Commission, as it says there, was canceled. What I'm doing in the interim is getting input from downtown businesses. I'm gonna work with Jenna Lynn at DBI to get their input on the draft sign ordinance. It just seems fair that they should get to look at it and kind of weigh in on it since it does affect them heavily. I know that there are some concerns about the banner signs downtown. So I'm going to get that input for the Planning Commission to review at their October meeting. Other than that, I don't have any
real quick question, not to put you on the spot. but
Okay.
The League of Women Voters banner request
Oh.
and Harb input.
Right. Harb, I put that on our Harb agenda, but we did not get to it because the meeting ran longer than usual.
Okay.
But it was mostly informational anyway, because we had talked to Matt Almond about how it's not really feasible to do what they would like to do with our existing banners and the way that we have everything mounted. So
Okay.
it was more just informational for Harb, and they didn't have any questions about it or anything.
So are you saying this should go ahead on the streets now, or are you gonna bring it back up again?
No, I think it should go on to streets,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so basically, for the public, they recommended against doing the lower hanging banners on the light posts because the cost of installation, which is what Matt talked about, and the lowered heights of the banners would be below the 7.5-foot level that we require to keep for pedestrian safety, so you can walk underneath them without getting your head hit.
Right. And if I recall correctly, I think the sample that they had sent, we didn't have the same kind of hooks or,
Eyelets in the banners, yeah, we
Right.
don't have,
right, so,
they're different from what we have.
would just be sort of problematic for us to do that.
So we'll send this on now to the streets committee for review.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait.
Any questions for me?
Nope.
So we're still under your area. We have
Yeah.
Mr. Brooks's nuisance
Oh, yeah.
code report. Any questions? While Mr. Brooks is here, oh, yes, thank you. There's also the building code report, which I thought we moved to special committee.
Okay, I typed this in, okay, we'll do that later.
Yeah, I forgot about that. So I think we talked about this a few meetings ago, but the way that the rental reports come in, if I would convert them to a PDF, which is what Alyssa does with all of the documents when she sends them out to you, it would look a mess. So I forgot, but I will send you the rental reports that are just in the Excel spreadsheet file tomorrow. I'll make a note to do that, and I'll try and remember to do that in advance of the meeting so you guys have a chance to look at it, so.
I think there was some building code permit.
The building
values.
stuff is in there, but so the building code reports come in PDF and they look nice, but the rental reports, just the way that they do them, they're just in this Excel file, and I haven't been able to find a pretty way to PDF them without them being
Okay.
100 pages long, so,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Ralph?
Yes.
I would like to say I did appreciate Harry Brooks's attempt to analyze the data and break it down. I thought it was insightful. I don't have any great conclusions, but I did appreciate his attempt at analyzing the data.
Yeah, so I agree with you, John. I do want to know, what does LOS obstruction mean?
Line of sight,
Okay, and,
the sight triangle.
right, okay. Can you give us a quick general about how are you going to be using these graphs?
On what?
How are you using these graphs? Because I think, like John said, I think they're an excellent thing to see and look, but how are you using them?
Well, you had to be a little bit more specific, but like I think John might have been referring to the last page.
Yeah.
With the violation density.
Right.
That just, it's something that you think you intrinsically know. And if you were to ask me where the density of violations were, I would have picked that street and that block. But you don't really know unless you crunch the numbers. It was just like today I was out and I spent my time on 2 streets and wrote up 15 letters. But it's because if you know where to go to, the vast majority of the violations are there. And it's just trying to get the most bang for the buck in terms of getting people educated and getting things straightened out.
And Harry, I also thought it was insightful when you broke it down relative to our resident and non-resident rental owners. The number
And
of
I actually have
residents-
more data about that, but I think some of that you probably aren't interested in, but.
I found it educational. I appreciated it. I want to say thank you.
You're welcome.
So just for the public's purpose, I actually have this printed out. So he has these pie charts that show, in this particular case, it's the type of violations that are coming. So this big blue part is grass, just FYI.
Well, yeah, I lump, it says weeds, but I lump high grass and weeds all into one instead of trying to break it out into
Right.
separate.
This one shows where the violations occurring
Each ward.
by ward.
Each ward.
Who's winning?
Which one has the largest?
It's usually the
West
west and
Ward.
the south.
Then there's some that are just, just numbers on the, by ward. And then he does the same thing for rental properties. And this is a schematic of the whole borough showing where the violations are. So those are the kinds of things that he presented to us, which has been really helpful to us, because I've never seen this before, and it gives us an idea of where things are going and where you might need to
It
focus.
appears your enforcement's very even by looking at the
Yeah.
information, which is very favorable.
Yeah. So,
I have a comment.
yeah,
Could we just put Harry's report on the website?
We can do
And
that,
that
sure.
way people can go and look at it?
Yeah, it doesn't name any names or give addresses.
Yeah, that's
Right.
true. Sure.
That way, it shows it more transparency. and people
if
can
you,
see what's
before
there.
you do that, could you label the top pages as to what they're, because they just say data at that point. It took me a while to figure out what kind of data we were looking at.
Well, there's a subtitle underneath that,
Oh,
to the left and to the top.
okay.
You
Okay.
know, Joanne, Sean and Ralph are now sitting here going, I'm going to have to give a report like Harry's report.
That's why mine's taking so long.
And I want to tell you, yours is really good, Sean.
Oh, you gotta see the next one coming up.
I'll convert to graphs and stuff.
Okay, great. Let's move on. Tom, you want to do your mayor's report?
All right, thank you very much. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that we are down another police car. I kind of assume everyone knows we had one of our cars was totaled last week in an accident. It was in pursuit and someone ran through, correct me if I'm wrong, Sean.
Following.
Pardon?
There was no pursuit.
They were following
Yeah,
somebody.
they were
Yeah, they were following somebody and someone else ran through a stop sign or a red light and broadsided our vehicle. The officer that was in the vehicle was not harmed, but the car was totaled. So, with that, we'll move on to brighter and better things. We got a notification, or Ralph, I think, received it from the Pennsylvania Municipal League. It's advocating action on a request a consumer fireworks hearing. This is a state organization that is advocating that boroughs, townships get together and contact our local state representatives, both Senate and House, to request that a meeting be held with the House, State and Senate House Agricultural Committee to hold a meeting to vet this issue. And this is regarding Act 43, when the state legalized consumer fireworks, and it's not only an issue in this town, it's an issue all over the state. So I would like council to approve or a letter writing to our representatives to help facilitate a hearing to look at Act 43. It's an act that was passed without any money coming to the boroughs, and a lot of the boroughs and townships are expending an awful lot of time and money trying to enforce the laws, as we've been trying to do here. So I think it needs to be looked at by the state, reviewed, and hopefully revised.
We need a motion to be made?
Yes.
I believe
write
so.
the
Yes,
letter.
yes.
I will make the motion to write the letter to contact our state legislators relative to reversing the consumer fireworks legalization.
Thank you, Mark.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Eaton and Prendergast.
The only other thing I have to
Wait
mention.
a minute.
Oh, you gotta vote on that. All right.
Rush the process.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Do you want to have Tom help you with that letter?
I can take care of it.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, the only other thing I have, Melissa, I don't know if you're gonna mention the outdoor expo, since we don't have a meeting prior to that, but.
After you.
Well, you can pile on too, reinforce it when you give your report. On October the 3rd, there'll be I don't know how many, this is the 3rd?
Second.
The 2nd?
COVID took the second one.
Oh, COVID, yeah, all right, well, this will be the second kind of annual outdoor expo to be held in Telegram Park on Sunday, October the 3rd. It runs from, I believe, noon until 5. There'll also be live music throughout the day, starting around 12:30, that'll run till about 7. So if you're looking for things to do, and if you can help us promote this to anybody that might be interested in the Outdoor Expo, and Melissa can give you more information on that. And the live music, there'll be 4 bands that will include blues, bluegrass, classic rock, and then Tommy Wareham and the Intrigs will finish up the evening. So make it a day down in the park, October the 3rd. That's it.
Any questions for the mayor? Thank you. My turn. I have 2 items. The first one was the Spring Creek Watershed Commission met last week. We discussed the authorities letter, and there will be a official reply soon. The 2 individuals, Paul Takak and Bill Sharp, are going to be working on it and then getting back to the council about it. So there's no action at this time. Second, last week, lightning struck a house here in the historic district and the roof caught on fire. Due to the swift response from a total of 5 different fire companies, the 2 Bellefonte companies, Pleasant Gap, Milesburg, and Walker Township, as well as the Bellefonte Police and Emergency Medical Services, the home was saved and everyone came out safe and sound. On behalf of the borough, I'd like to thank all of the first responders for their work to save not only the Garrett House, but for all of your great work throughout the year. In honor of that, I would like to request another moment of spot silence specifically in your honor. Thank you. Sean, could you relay this on to the fire departments and the EMS for us? Could you relay our thanks and gratitude to?
Yep, I sure will.
Thank you. That's the end of my report. Any questions? Seeing none, moving on. Building and property, Frank?
No report, we didn't have any meeting.
Okay. Any questions for Frank? Seeing none, finance? Deb?
Yes, in your packet are the
committee meeting minutes from our meeting on September 14th. There is one item that needs action this evening. The Airport Authority has requested a pledge for their incentive pool fund. They're trying to lure or attract American Airlines connecting service between State College and Charlotte, North Carolina. I need a motion to budget $1,500 in the 2022 budget under economic development.
Clayton, so we have a second?
I'll second, go ahead.
I'll second Brackville.
Brackville. So this money, just FYI, is only contingent upon American Airlines actually committing to these additional flights.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So, I thought it was yesterday or so, the Center County Commissioners gave $250,000 towards that project, and I'm wondering why we have to add anything to it if they're getting the whole amount that they requested the first time.
Mike Pike contacted me, I think, and Doug can follow up on this. Mike said that, yes, that's what the county was going to do, but in order to further attract American Airlines, they need to see that the communities within the area also are supporting this. And by giving a minimal amount from each community, and he asked for then he suggested the $1,500.
I have to ask, is any other surrounding townships giving any money?
Yes, but actually, when the authority gives the presentation to American Airlines, it is more impressive to American Airlines that they see the communities want the service. Our $1,500 donation is really quite small compared to the other municipalities. They actually were looking for $2,000 to $2,500 from Bellefonte Borough, so we're really on the low end. The total package from the community only is about $300,000. When we look at what the airport is offering to American to give us that service, and we're hoping that Penn State chips in some additional funds that could bring the package up to close to $500,000, I believe.
It's actually gonna be more than that, because
Yeah.
the airport authority's gonna waive fees for the next few years. I don't quote me on the numbers, so I'm not gonna put any numbers out, but there's a cash package up front, and then there's waiver of fees that the airport would ordinarily collect. They think that, together, that'd be enough to get these extra flights into the community, which would hopefully help everybody.
Frank, buddy, this is a service we've been trying to attract American for a number of years. And airlines are very, very selective when it comes to providing service. So as an airport authority member and a community member, I'm hopeful that this service will be granted from American. So it's a small price to pay. It shows community effort. And to answer your question directly, no, we are not the only one. And our donation or our contribution is quite small compared to others.
I would just as Joanne said, if the deal never goes through, there's no funds expended by the borough.
I think it's money well invested. Myself.
Other questions, comments, discussion?
I just want to, Doug, it's an American flight to Charlotte.
Yes.
Okay, we already have American service.
We do, it's affiliate.
Yeah.
So this is 2 flights a day is what we're
Right.
asking for.
This, I think help me out, Ralph, is it 2 flights a day?
I think so.
Yeah.
2 flights a day to Charlotte.
Right.
Which would be fantastic.
Right. Yeah, I was just, when you were saying about American, it was, yeah.
Thanks, Joe.
We already have it to Philly. but
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
getting another,
This would expand the service.
right.
Any other discussion, questions?
I would just like to say if the finance committee or the council might be open to maybe a little bit more than 1,500. Being an airport authority member, I think we're looking for more like 2,000. I don't know if that's something you might reconsider.
I know that Mike said max of 1,500, but we can, that,
It's
when we look at the rest of the
budget
budget. So the reason we're doing this now is that the package needs to go to American Airlines
By the
before the end of the
22nd.
year. So by saying that we're committing to 1,500,
Okay.
that's the minimum. If we come up with extra funds later,
Okay.
that would be a different discussion. But this is just now so that we can get this off to the commissioner so they can put it as part of their
Sure,
package.
you're right.
The airport authority has, they're also talking to Lock Haven, Lewistown.
I don't
East,
think so, I don't think so outside the county, John.
Okay.
Have you heard any different?
No, I haven't. I think they went to Center County government and was trying to work.
Center region, yeah.
Kind of the economic development partners that are in the center region, and I guess we're one of them.
Right.
I think the reason being, John, is Lock Haven would, Williamsport would probably, who are sort of in dire straits at this time, would appreciate any support from Lock Haven instead of University Park State College.
Yeah, but you're not gonna, you're only gonna get to go to Philly from Williamsport.
Yeah, we have billboards in Lock Haven that say Fly State College, so
Yeah.
we're working on that market. It's a good point and good
Yeah.
suggestion.
Okay, anything else? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No.
One no. Alderman.
Okay, are there any questions about the other items mentioned in the meeting minutes? The October 4th work session, the next council meeting will include a budget presentation, and the Finance Committee meets next on Tuesday, October 12th at 10 a.m.
This LERTA thing, do you have anything to say on it at this point this evening?
I would just say that a part of the budget focus this year will be to look at a LERTA program, which is an acronym involving a reduced tax, or I think it's a tax incentive for developers or renovators of properties where the assessed value doesn't change. It's very attractive to get new development and or renovations underway. We would work with the two other taxing agencies, the county and the school district. So it came out as a result of the strategic management plan study, and one of the recommendations out of that was to look at this program. So we will be doing that this fall, and we'll have more information as time goes on.
Okay, and that's the end of my report.
Okay, any questions on finance? Seeing none, Melissa, you want to do Parks and Rec?
I was not at the August 9th meeting, so I do not have an update for that.
I don't have much here. I don't think there's any action items that I recall. I don't know if they have other
I
members.
think there was the one group that came in, that the church group that wanted to come in.
Yeah, the committee took no action other than to say that the reservation fee
Would have
is
to-
what it is.
Because they are not a Bellefonte-based organization.
Okay.
And we asked Ralph to go back or Melissa to go back and talk to them about if they wanted to have the fee. I don't know what happened after that.
Okay, thank you. My only other thing is for the Outdoor Adventure Expo. It is indeed on October 2nd from 12 to 5. We have over 50 vendors across food vendors, outdoor recreation, nonprofits, makers, fly fishing. So 50 vendors is quite a bit in a pandemic, and our chair, Troy Weston, has worked really hard to have a well-rounded event. There will be kayak rides and fly fishing demos and a bunch of other workshops during the day on beekeeping and cooking and some fun stuff for the kids. So I invite everyone on council and everyone in the public to come out on October 2nd from 12 to 5. The third.
Which is it a Sunday?
It is a Sunday.
Sunday, yeah.
Sunday. Well, we could not compete with football season.
Yeah.
Sunday, October 3rd, from 12 to 5. The music goes on till 7 in Talleyrand Park, the side closer to Big Spring Spirits.
So the Talleyrand Park extension.
Yeah. And that is all for me.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to Human Resources. John?
Okay, we had a committee meeting on September 8th. The topic of discussion was the upcoming union contract negotiations. The committee the committee will be in attendance with the staff leading the discussions with the union on September 27th. No further actions or no actions required at this time.
Any questions? Seeing none, moving on to safety. Randy?
I have 2 reports. One, the Center Region Council of Governments hybrid meeting. Those are my notes that I took at the meeting. Because it'll be a little while till we get to those minutes, I think, unless Gina saw them. But the other one is the Bellefonte Safety Committee, the work group safety committee. There's on the agenda, it shows 2 meetings stating that, and it's both the same meeting. I did a write-up on that too. I wasn't sure if the minutes would come out yet. So those are both in the packet for review.
So does anyone have any questions about these notes? Seeing none, anything else for safety? Okay, moving on to water, refuse, and compost. Doug?
Just the authority draft minutes are in your packet. If you have any questions about that, I would try to answer them. Other than that, I have no report. Anything to add, Ralph or Dawn? No.
Move on then to streets. Mary?
We met on September 9th and September 16th. In your packet, as was mentioned earlier, there is the results of that that survey that Jenny Lynn Schuster did among downtown businesses. Just kind of summing up, especially what relates to our upcoming plans. Around the Diamond, 53 businesses replied, more than 3/4 of them located in downtown Belfast. Of those surveyed, 40% prefer no change. Of the 60% that would like to see some kind of change in that area, a little more than half, about 57%, prefer the option with using the bump outs to slow traffic, and about 43% of those who would like to see a change prefer the traffic circle option. And that is something that is still in process. And relating to that, we're planning on having the meetings to get public comment on this issue on Thursday, November 4th at 10:30 and Saturday, November 6th.
No, Thursday, November 6:30.
6:30, oh, I read that backwards. 6:30 on the 4th and 10:30 on the 6th. And we are going to, and Jason Stimmel from Panoni is available both of those times to come in and give a presentation. We would like to have the drawings of those two options available here at the Borough Building for people to view in the week leading up to that. And I think we do need a motion. I will make a motion to approve and advertise these 2 dates for the public meeting.
Does that include the CNET coverage for both
Including the
sessions?
CNET coverage, yes.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Abbott and Brackbill.
I was just checking the Penn State schedule. I would suggest you change the November 4th at 10:30. There's a 1 p.m. Penn State game that day. And I'm sure people that can't make it Thursday are going to go to the game rather than come to any public.
It's an away game.
It's an away game.
It's an away game.
Yeah, it's in November 6th. That's right.
So that's why
I'm
we,
sorry. Well, there's still
Well, that's why we wanted to have it in the morning, because there isn't a game time yet, so we thought having it in the morning gave us the best chance of being not near that
That's
game.
good.
No conflict. yeah.
No one's doing anything bad.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, so moved. So 2 additional CNET coverages.
And then the only other thing I have is that we will be discussing the vegetation ordinance, for the right-of-way ordinance, at our meeting on September 30th. And that's when the gentleman, I don't have his name in my notes, but the
Tim
gentleman who
Bannis.
spoke to us, who's a landscape architect, and who lives in Belfast, is going to be at that meeting, and we'll discuss all of our options at that point.
Okay. In addition to that, Don and I met with Jasmine Fields and Lance King of State College Borough today. Lance is their arborist, and they do have a program for this kind of landscaping, and he has agreed to come to the same meeting. So we'll have 2 experts there that day.
Great.
So just to confirm, there's no streets meeting this week, or is there?
I mean, there are some things in here that if I will not be there, so if other.
You weren't there, Mary, but we decided we are having one. We've already invited a couple people in, right?
Okay. Just wanted to make sure, because I know we talked about it.
Any other questions or comments?
I'd just like to ask, how are you going to advertise those meetings? Are they going to be on, going to make a news release to?
Yes, we do,
Press and
we do a
CBT.
press release, and of course,
Okay.
our website and so on, Facebook, whatever else we have, of course, the paper,
Okay, thank you.
yes.
Anything else for streets? Seeing none, energy and environment, Mike?
All right, we didn't have a meeting per se, but we got some information on the Bright Cities, and it's in your package. We're going to try to get try to apply for one of these grants, but our application needs to be in by October 1st, so I'd like to make a motion to approve the application.
Okay, so Mike is making a motion to approve the joint State College Bellefonte tree planting grant application to be submitted to the Bright Cities program. And if you have a second, and then I can discuss it.
Oh, second.
Okay, Prendergast and Eaton. That was mostly what this meeting was this afternoon, Don, myself, and the other 2. Basically, State College is going to be using volunteers, and we'll be using our public works employees according to what Jasmine and Don talked about. There is no financial match to this, so so the only cost we would have would be employee time. The money will be granted by the end of October, and the project must be completed by April 2023. And what we discussed this afternoon was doing approximately 50 trees here in Bellefonte and 150 or so in State College, because they're bigger. Part of them would be bare root, the other part would be burlap bags. And if you can give additional information, that might be helpful.
I think the most important thing for council to consider is that when we're talking about, this amount of trees, I know the Shade Tree Commission and we at the borough probably have maybe 15 to 20 people that have shown interest in trees, but the idea behind this was we're in the right-of-way where trees have been cut down and not replaced for whatever reason, that the borough would just put the tree back in there. So you may be, it's a situation where you may end up getting some criticism for people who really don't want trees, but there's areas where there have been a lot of trees and there's removed and they haven't been replaced.
Has the borough ever considered planting new willow trees down around the stream.
We just planted about
Did you?
4 willows about 5 years ago, buddy.
Okay. Yeah, they're not gonna last too much longer, probably. Been in there a long time.
Yeah, a couple of them, yeah, need to be removed.
What kind of trees are you planting?
Be most likely maples,
There was some discussion about something different downtown, but in the residential areas, mostly maples.
Well, when my sidewalk starts cracking.
That's
And my
exactly.
sewer
Yeah, that's what you're
lines
gonna
get
do.
infiltrated by tree roots, I'll send the bill to the borough.
It's gonna be at least 15, 20 years before
Probably
that,
not my
that
list. I
starts
love
happening.
trees, but there's places for them. And when it destroys the sidewalks that our nuisance code person has to write letters to people to replace sidewalks that cost thousands of dollars. It's a little hard for residents to take that expense.
So Lance, we talked about that this afternoon, and he's the one who's going to be looking at the types of trees. We don't have to select the trees at this point for the grant. Once we get the grant, we're going to look at those kinds of issues and try to find something that works best in each area.
We can't even decide if we can plant flowers between the sidewalk and the curb, and now I love the trees, but, you know, we're contradicting ourselves.
Well, not yet, they're having a meeting on that.
I'd like to just interject one, because it was sort of a natural segue about trees and damage. There's trees in the park that are being damaged by a rogue beaver. And that's no lie. There's 2 of them.
You
that have
snitch.
been gnawed down.
If that's the case, it would be best to get those beavers removed because they can cause some real damage.
Yeah.
Well,
We're gonna get a hold of somebody.
There's one around, we just don't want, we don't want the beaver to be damaged.
Just move them
Just like
downstream
to-
a bit.
Like to have them moved someplace more, a little more remote where they're not chewing down our planted trees.
Take them downstream.
Well, if you remember
This is-
years ago along Spring Creek between Bellefonte and Milesburg, there were a bunch of beavers in there that got
Yeah.
relocated, as I should say.
We
Okay.
got a park beaver.
So
Urban.
let's get back onto the topic of discussion.
Yeah, trees.
So, any other comments?
Well, other than I really appreciate the shade that my tree gives me, and I'll worry about the sidewalk when it happens.
So, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
No,
1 no. Johnson.
Okay, the next one is the ICLEI meeting that you were at, Joanne.
Okay, you want me to do that?
You would, please?
Yeah. Okay, at that meeting, Don presented our audit, and we heard from a financial consultant who recommends that when we create our budgets, we note the percentage of any fund that can be considered to assist in the community with sustainability, so that when we go out for bonds, investors have an idea of our commitment to sustainability. He stated that more and more often that the investors are asking about this issue when considering purchasing municipal bonds. So if we have some kind of percentage linked to those line items that have a sustainability component, whether it's trees or sewer repairs or whatever, that helps in getting people to purchase those funds. And I sent this information along with the slides to Deb Clayton for the Financial Committee's review. That's it on that.
And, okay, I'm sorry, got sidetracked. Solar United had a follow-up meeting, an information meeting on the 15th for people who were interested in joining the co-op. They also had a press release. I know it was covered on ABC. Somebody had a local video of it.
WJAC did it. I
Was it
think.
WJAC?
I think so.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought it was ABC. Okay.
Now, there are 2 for the public's first, there were 2 public Zoom presentations over the last week, and there will be a third one, and it's scheduled for Thursday, October 28th at 7 p.m. Individuals who are possibly interested in solar energy or electric vehicle chargers can register for this session at solarunitedneighbors.org/Center County. When you get to that page, click on the events tab and this event will come up and you just register. It's free, you can ask questions, and they currently, as of this afternoon, have 15 members throughout the county. Once they get to 30, they'll start looking for proposals for reduced costs for installation.
Okay, and then committee hearing is going to be held on Wednesday, the 22nd, and we're going to review that reimagined Appalachia request, see what we come up with. And that's the end of my report.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to special committees reports.
We already
Did
talked
I?
about the COG report, so we're good there.
Okay,
Madam President, I do have an MPO.
good, go ahead.
We're meeting Tuesday, September 28th at 6 p.m. in the COG building, and that's located where Center Region Code is. I can't give you a specific address.
Cato Park.
Yeah. And that's at 6 p.m. and we'll be considering the TIP, which is the transportation plan. That's the Center County Transportation Improvement Program. And I'm pleased to say that under those considerations, the Route 150 Phoenix Avenue intersection improvement is being considered for the TIP. So now that won't be approved until 2022, but it is on the list. And let's see, on September 28th, let me get these dates straight to make sure. Oh no, the 22nd and 23rd of September, that's Wednesday and Thursday, from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Wyndham Garden Hotel. That's 310 Elks Club Road. It's the old Elks Club in Bollesburg. The MPO, well, not the MPO, but they'll be discussing or taking comments on the State College connector, and that connector is from Potter's Mills to Interstate 99. So if you wanted to view that potential plan and make comments, that's a public meeting. So those are 2 things, I think, of interest to us. And other items, as you all know, the Y in Zion is being constructed. Where's those route numbers?
550 and 64.
That intersection is being reconstructed to a safer intersection at this time. There'll be a light there. So that completes my report.
What about do you have any information on what's happening with I-99? I know there's some I-80.
Interstate 80 and
yeah, they're just doing something right now that I think the public should.
Go ahead, because it's escaping me right now what you might want to present.
What I know is something I read on the table in the other room this afternoon. It has the westbound lanes will have 1 lane closed in the evenings, and the eastbound will have 1 lane completely closed for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. I recall that, but
They're obviously they're in like a multi-year construction project. They're working on what will be the new interchange 2 miles down the road from the existing Bellefonte interchange. Once they get that done, they'll be able to move up and do more around the Bellefonte interchange that's there now. But we're seeing traffic patterns change frequently,
right,
as part of the ongoing construction. So generally speaking, there's, if you can avoid that area, if you're just traveling through, it's probably better to do that.
I know at some point Jacksonville Road
Yes,
will be closed, going out of Bellefonte towards Jacksonville. Yes, Ralph is absolutely right. It changes month to month. And as he said, I would, if you can avoid that area, avoid it for the next couple of years. Really. Sorry, I can't give you a better answer than that, Joy.
Well, thank you. Anything else?
I have one for Nittany Valley Joint Planning Commission. We received the same information that Doug just gave through Tom Zilla at that meeting. The other thing that might interest Bellefonte is that Banner Township had requested whether we could put our Halloween celebration on the same day, and we decided we couldn't do it this year, but maybe we could look at it next year. So there's other things that kind of go in there, like Walker Township, if it falls, Halloween falls on a Sunday, they won't participate on a Sunday, so they'd have to clear things like that if we want to group our communities together.
Okay.
That was it.
Okay, anything else? Any other special committee reports? Okay, seeing none, old business. Oh, no, your report and then old business.
Thank you.
You're still you.
All right, no problem. My monthly report for the month of August is in your materials. If you have any questions, just let me know.
Any questions?
Good report.
Thank you.
Seeing none, now old business.
Okay, thanks. We have a note here about the crosswalk being relocated by the YMCA. You may notice some concrete work taking place right now. They tell me by the end of this week, the concrete work will be done. And then soon after, we'll put in the plastic delineators that go along the white stripe that's on the pavement. And then, of course, the plastic curb goes in at the same time. That's all we're going to do until the public hearing and we get some feedback. But that's considered part of the temporary improvements. And people will be able to see what that entails and give us some feedback at these public meetings that Mary mentioned.
Can I request that the initial map that you showed us months ago be posted on our website? Because I did have some business owners ask me what the lines were.
It should be, but we can post it towards the top, so we'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. Okay. The next item, you heard us talk about cybersecurity or our insurance agents talk about that. We are making those changes as we speak. If you have difficulties or any questions about new processes to enter or check borough email or get to your agenda packet, please let us know. Alyssa can help get us through that. We're going to break it down into groups and work with, say, the employees at the treatment plant, the authority members and so on, and work our way through the process, get everybody up to speed, but you'll be seeing changes in those areas. Those are the only two items we have listed under old business.
Does anybody else have any old business?
They'll change it too, because I struggle with getting into the agenda or the meeting packet sometimes. There seems to be a wrinkle every now and then. This time I didn't have any issues with it.
Good. I'd like to say it's easier, but probably won't be.
And I had such an hassles that I ended up printing everything out this stuff.
I had trouble getting into, but I went through the alternate route, and I'm sorry I was late because I did get your other link, but my internet is not working well. So here I am.
Okay. And then, hearing no more old business, go move to new business.
We have one note under new business is that the Boroughs Association published their 2022 budget bulletin. If you didn't get the link where you would like us to get you a copy, we're more than happy to do that. Obviously, the emphasis is the next few meetings will be focused on budget work and preparing and getting ready to adopt the budget for next year.
Could you just send that on out to everybody? Just
Sure,
so I
yes.
think that way everybody has a chance to look at it.
We'll do that.
Thank you.
So, a question, so I assume we'll be having work session,
We will.
part of that, and then it'll be part of the meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, there'll be some finance committee meetings, a lot of it, and then work sessions, as different funds are ready to be presented.
The only thing I ask is if we can kind of control the topics in the agenda that need to be discussed, or can be, should be, but if there's something that could wait.
I have to agree with you, Randy. There's just not enough time to go. We have to prioritize and really focus on the budget work between now and the end of the year.
Okay, anything else? Do we have any public comment that wasn't on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Barfield and Prendergast. And seeing no, huh?
8:53.
At 8:53 PM. That's a first for us.
That's very good.
The what?
Oh, that's okay.